Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Level Up Your Virtual Training, Best Practices for Your Virtual Session Success. My name is Stephanie Hurst and I'm the Member Program Specialist for the National Apartment Association. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the webinars page of the NAA website by early next week. During the discussion, you may type questions into the Q&A or chat boxes on your screen, and we will share them with our presenter. We have left time at the end for questions. And now I will turn the microphone over to Jesse Miller, a member of NAA's Next Gen Committee, to introduce today's outstanding speaker. Jesse?
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, on behalf of our NAA Next Gen Committee, we want to thank you for joining us for this Level Up Your Virtual Training, Best Practices for Your Virtual Session Success. Try and say that 3 times really fast, right? I'd say over the last 14 months, we've all been in a somewhat web-based environment, if you will, and have had to try to perfect the virtual facilitation of trainings and meetings, sale proposals, happy hours, and the like in that setting. And with that, it's like, I think most of us kind of fall into 3 different buckets in terms of how comfortable you are with facilitating those virtual sessions. Bucket 1 is the, I got this people. Bucket 2 is the, I think I've got this people. And bucket 3, if you're like me, is I think I've gotten worse over the last 14 months, people in that sense. So therefore, we're going to provide you with 3 takeaways within the next 56 minutes. And these tools that you could take and hopefully be able to implement immediately into what you're doing. First tool is we're going to give you the 411 as to whether or not you should use an on-camera meeting session format versus webinar format. Second tool is resources on how you can optimize your presentation material for a virtual session. And then lastly is secrets on how to keep your audience engaged and interacting. So with that, I'm super happy to present our speaker, Sloan Sorbonne. She is Washington Multifamily Housing Association's, or WMFA for short, Director of Career Development and Education. And based upon her leadership, has helped grow Washington State's association from its launch in 2008 to one of the top 10 associations within the US, within NAA. Their association's also been awarded with multiple accolades for growth, as well as just awesome education programs that Sloan and her team have put together. I also want to mention I'm personally honored to have Sloan here with us because I've been really fortunate to be able to work alongside her for the last 11 years. And in my opinion, there's only a small handful of people in your life who are integral to your career growth and success early on. And Sloan is one of them for me. So thank you for that, Sloan. And with that, Sloan, I will hand it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jesse. And thank you, Stephanie and NAA and the Next Gen group for hosting me today. I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you. I want to start with a caveat that even after 15 months, I am not an expert. I still make mistakes. There's still people that do things cooler than me, but I feel like along with the team at the association, my career development committee, we have learned some things and we've delivered. I mean, thousands of students have gone through our courses, events, all kinds of different virtual environments over the last 15 months. So I'd love to share a few of the things we've learned with you, but I'd also love to hear some of the things that you're doing. So we're going to keep that chat going. Jesse's kind of my sidekick today. He's going to be popping in and out. If we're talking about something that you have a great idea on or you've used in the past or an idea, trick or tip, drop it in the chat so we can all benefit from that. So I really just thank you for that. I want to start with a fun little icebreaker. Jesse, I want to know, and I'm going to ask all of you all too, if you were going to be stranded on a deserted island. I was on an island last week, and all you had with you for survival was the last thing you ordered on Amazon. What would that be? Jesse, what would you have for survival if you had to do the last thing you ordered on Amazon? I see a Turkish towel. I want one of those Turkish towels, by the way. They've been all over Instagram.
Yeah, I think I ordered toilet paper as the last thing on Amazon. So I don't know how much survival could go on with that, but yeah, good question.
Yeah. Oh, we got all kinds of good stuff here. Home decor, sneakers, bathing suit, yes. AirPods, cat food, tanning lotion. So some of us will be in better shape than others, but I just thought that'd be a good way for us to get things started today. We know that as we've been stuck at home, we're ordering more Amazon than ever. I know it comes to my doorstep many times a week. But yeah, my picture here is just an example. This was me delivering virtual, some kind of a virtual session last week, and you kind of do what you have to do. That is a yes, a recycle bin under my laptop. So we're going to talk later about things you do. Nobody that I was with that day knew that was happening, but yes, I had a recycle bin under my laptop. But I didn't have to use a virtual background because that was my actual background last week. So yeah, like Jesse said, we're just going to kind of hit 3 big points today. We're going to talk about when to use meeting format versus webinar. And what we're really talking about is kind of camera on, not camera, or the audience having camera and mic ability or not. For the purpose of just my information today, I use 98% Zoom platform for my offerings and the events that we offer. I know that a lot of you are using a lot of other types of tools, and we'll learn about that in a moment. So some of my nomenclature and vocabulary will be Zoom related, but most of the platforms have similar functionality, might just be called something different. We're also going to talk about how to optimize your presentation material for the virtual session. How do you take something that you were in the past doing in a classroom in 6 or 8 hours and do it in a virtual session? Not in 6 or 8 hours. Nobody should be offering that kind of a virtual training, but how do we condense it, still make it effective, and still make it a valuable experience for the learner? And then finally, and I think most importantly, keeping our participants engaged. All of you right now have multiple screens in front of you. You have at least one monitor, maybe 2, maybe 3. You have a phone, you maybe have an Apple Watch, you have all kinds of distractions. My job today is to try to keep you right here with me. And I want to share with you some tricks on how you do that with your participants as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into it. We're going to start with how we're doing. I have a couple of polls that Jesse and I wanted to throw at you guys just to see what kind of virtual offerings are you doing? We took a peek at the registrations and kind of the different roles and titles that you hold. So it helped us tailor today a little bit to know a little bit more about what you're offering. What are you in charge of putting out to either your members, your clients, your customers, your associates? So we're going to run a couple polls here. I see that there's 41 of us on right now. So I'm hoping to see 41 respondents to each of these polls. So we're going to start with the first one, and that is, what type of virtual session do you deliver the most? Is it meetings? Is it trainings? Or is it events? So conference, maybe some kind of legal seminar, symposium, maybe it's your education conference you're delivering virtually. So just, you're probably all doing a little bit of everything, but what's the most? So we got 28 out of 38, 30. Keep it going. That tells me you're paying attention. 34, we're almost there. 35. And a couple of those on their phones that are scrambling right now going, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Okay. We're going to call that good. So it's a pretty even split. So about 56% of us are mostly doing meetings, and about 44% of us are doing trainings. Nobody put events or anything like that. I would assume some of you that are doing the trainings and things like that are probably also doing some kind of educational events as well over the last year or so. Okay, so we're going to go here now to the second poll that we have for you. And I'd like to know what platforms you're primarily using. So Zoom, Microsoft Teams, GoTo, or something other. $30, 32, 33, 34. Ooh, 36. All right. That's great. So yeah, it's a pretty good mix. So primarily Zoom, or over 50% of us, 25% of us using Teams, 17% GoTo. I'm curious what the other, what that is. So if you answered other, what is another platform that you are using out there since you're using that primarily? You can throw that in the chat if you want. And then my last poll for right now is, of all the virtual sessions you've attended during the pandemic, so I think we're what, Jesse, 14 or 15 months in at this point, what percentage of them actually added value? You walked away and said, that was a good use of my hour, my 2 hours. And I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I carved time out of my day for that. That made a difference for me. Okay, pretty close to everybody responding here. Okay, so 61% of us said less than 50% of this virtual sessions I've attended brought value to me. Only, let's see, 14% said less than 25%, 19% are 50 to 75, and 6% are 75 to 100. So the majority of us are living in the less than half of them brought value. And so that's what I want us to remember when we're in charge of putting on a virtual session of some type is I need to bring value to my participant in some way. And if I can't do that, we need to ask ourselves, was this necessary? Did I need to offer this virtual session, or did we as an organization need to do that? So I'm going to tuck this away for right now, and we're going to go ahead and jump in. And that kind of leads us to first things first. And I want to start with, just because you can offer a virtual session doesn't mean you always should. I want to remind us that sometimes a quick phone call, an email, or a text, yes, I'm thinking of you next geners, sometimes a text works just fine for a quick touch base. And I'll admit that I'm an offender of this. I'm someone who I've been here in my home office for 15 months. I'm used to being with my members, with my students out there. And so in my committees. And so I, like every single meeting, I'm like, oh, here's my Zoom room. Here's my Zoom room. It's not always necessary. You can just have an actual phone call. I am somebody who works more effectively getting up and getting dressed and ready for my day every day. So I feel like I'm always camera ready. Not everybody does. So it's kind of rude to force them into a video call when a phone call would work, or a simple email. So just keep that in mind. If you're someone like me who just really loves eye to eye with people, if it can't be in person, you feel like you want to do it this way. Same thing with your meetings, I would say, especially like team meetings, management meetings, or anything like that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, but just really ask yourself that question. And then also organize your organization's schedules. One of the things we learned, I don't know, 60 days in, we have a monthly group of trainers and training managers in property management that meet here locally once a month. And about 60 days in, they said overwhelmingly what they were hearing from their people is they were inundated with virtual meetings and classes. So the trainers were getting orders from every part of the organization: marketing, operations, facilities. We need to train on this. We need a virtual session on that. We need a training on that. We need to roll this out. And what was happening is our operations folks were being inundated with 3-4 days of their week with one or multiple virtual sessions. So I would just say coordinate, like really plan and coordinate your virtual sessions, and whether it's a meeting or an educational offering or anything like that. And don't, kind of override each other. Prioritize. Not everything is the most important. Only some things are the most important. So really think about that when you're planning your organization's virtual offerings.
Hey, Sloan. So that one other came in the comments for platforms, and it was Google Meet.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm not familiar with that, but it's good to know that that's out there. And being Google, it's probably free and accessible. So I'll have to check that out. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. All right, so meeting our webinar, or really we should be saying camera on or camera off. So this is, again, in my experience over the last 15 months and working with different groups, whether it's a meeting or event, an educational offering, my kind of rationale is camera on would be smaller group, something that's relational or team oriented. Definitely anything around onboarding or orientation. If you're wanting to bring somebody in and get them to catch your culture of your organization and you're not able to do that in person, I drastically discourage you from doing that in a webinar format, right? So you want to have some kind of relational interaction with them. Educational series, something that's a multi-part, is a great way to do it in meeting or with camera and microphones on. Anything around brainstorming or consensus building, with your internal customers and stakeholders, again, because that's relational, and your committees and board of directors. For webinar, or like we're doing today, because we don't have over 50 actually today, maybe we should have mixed it up and done some kind of meeting format, but generally over 50, that it gets a little harder to manage a meeting format. It's not impossible. Things that are more seminar, symposium related. So for us, when we do our economic forecast, our education conferences, our legal symposiums, things that are bigger, we do those in webinar format. Or things that are external. And again, here I just have some of the different platforms that are typical. It's, again, not exhaustive, and I don't, I don't think one's better than the other. I think it's kind of what you're familiar with, as well as which functionality works best for you and your customer, your internal and external customers.
Hey, Sloan, a quick question for you. How do you feel that the use of the camera helps with like those nonverbal communication cues, getting feedback? Especially
so much. Yeah, especially as the facilitator or the instructor. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about the importance of that, because when camera's on, and I would suggest to you, if you have something that's a camera on offering, you require camera on. There's actually settings in Zoom, at least, where you can say they can't call in, like they have to use the actual equipment to get in, because you're doing it for a purpose. You want everyone to benefit from that. And yeah, certainly when I'm in a meeting format, I mean, even right now with you, I'm looking at you nodding your head, and we look for those cues to make sure that things made sense. And it also does force someone to be more engaged if they know that their camera's on, and they're not, over there, hanging out with the dog or playing video games on their phone or whatever. So so now we want to kind of we've moved from, how do we identify which format to use, to how do we optimize our material or the message we're trying to get across into a virtual format. So I want to start with the kind of the content and flow. First things first, you have to condense your material into manageable chunks. And this is kind of straight out of any kind of good facilitator training or anything like that. You don't want your content to overshadow your event or your presentation or your session, but you do have something you're trying to get across. Like today, there are certain points I'm hoping to share with you and that you leave today saying, that was a valuable use of my 1 hour. So I know there's some associations that are on the call today. We've taken the credential programs from NAAEI. Those are 8-hour days normally in a classroom, right? Well, we are certainly not going to do an 8-hour Zoom call. So we've condensed them into 3 to 4 hour days. And the way that we're able to do that is we take some things and we assign it as pre-work, some reading assignments, some things that you're going to say, okay, come read pages 1 through whatever, and come prepared to debrief that and discuss that. That can save you so much time, especially things that are basic in nature, kind of overview. So assigning pre-work is a great way to condense your material. And then if it really is just going to be longer, then split it up, make it multi-days. It's so much easier on your learner to do 3 90-minute sessions over a couple of weeks, or even in 1 week, really, than to do a 4-hour session or a 5-hour session. There's only so much that you can take in, and there's only so long that they can really stay engaged in a virtual setting. Couple of other things, like don't rely too heavily on slides. I think like 18 slides here, maybe I have 18 slides today, and that's 8 more than I wanted to have for a 1-hour session. I think that slides should be a visual connection to what you're saying. So they'll learn like, oh, I remember she said this about that because I saw this image and it kind of stuck in my head. It should not be your script. Your script that you're sharing with your participants does not belong on the screen. So so don't do that with your slides. And I would say also intros, icebreakers, and housekeeping are really key to engagement. Setting the expectation at the beginning, whether or not you're recording, whether or not that recording will be available to the participant. That way they know I don't have to write down every single thing that she's saying because I'm going to get that information. Now I can just really dial in. Or it's not going to be provided. So the things that I want to remember, I'm going to have to write those down. Be creative with your breaks. If it's a longer session, more than 90 minutes, you need to have at least a 5-minute break put in there, and be creative with those breaks. Throw things in like, when you come back from break, bring something yellow that you find around your environment. We have a really great guy here locally, Jason Loffridge. He's with Goodman Real Estate. He's on our Career Development Committee. He's a NAA faculty, so he teaches classes for us, and he has a dice. And when he does long classes, he rolls the dice at break. Somebody gets to pick a number, and the different number on the dice represent different things. So a 6 could be doing some kind of a stretch that everybody has to do together, and again, it's on camera. A 3 could be touching 3 walls in your room, and again, everybody's watching you do it. So be creative with that, and again, that adds engagement, gets everybody kind of talking, adds some laughter, have fun with it. So again, the intros, icebreakers, and housekeeping are really important. You notice when we got started today, that like awkward couple minutes when we're waiting for everybody to join, and the 3 of us that are on camera are just kind of standing there. Don't let that happen. Start talking to the people joining, even though they're not on camera and they can't see you, or we can't see you. Start engaging. You heard us say, hey, tell us where you're joining us from today, or how's the weather where you are, or as the phone, anything that can just kind of get things going. You want to do that. And so again, it starts engagement from the beginning, and it kind of lets people know, like, hey, this might not be so bad today. Okay, so we talked about content and flow. Now I want to talk a little bit about your speaker and equipment. I can't get too detailed today about the actual technical equipment, what model numbers. There's such a range, you guys, of equipment depending on your personal setup. Some people are super techie and cool. I have a son who's a full-time streamer. So like I just call Kai and I'm like, what camera do I get? And this is my budget. And you'd be surprised how inexpensive good equipment is. My headset that I'm using today is Logitech. It was like $80. And I'm using it because today's being recorded. My microphone that's on my camera is fine for normal meetings and things like that. But anytime something's being recorded, I want the sound to be super crisp and clear and not pick up anything background. So I think it's important for you to just keep some of those things dialed in. Set the expectations for your guest presenters as far as timing, materials. I have on here, get agreed upon permissions around recording and distribution. Your speaker might not be comfortable being recorded and having that distributed. They might not want to share their intellectual property with a broader group. So make sure you have that figured out ahead of time. Definitely do rehearsals and tech checks, whether you're the one presenting or you have a guest presenter. Jesse and Stephanie and I logged on 15 minutes before we got started today. We made sure everybody's sound was working. We made sure the slides were working, that the screen share was working. We tested the polls. So definitely do that. And then use a host and technical facilitator. Brandy, great question. I'll come back to that in just a moment. When you're doing a session, I almost always ask somebody to kind of be my backup. So today we have Stephanie, who's still in the background, making sure everything's running fine. If something was to happen, she has a copy of my slide deck. She could bring it up if something happened to mine. Jesse does as well. But even outside of that, when I have a guest presenter, I always get a copy of their slides ahead of time. I always get a copy of the polls, and I know what's going on, and I stay fully engaged the whole time. So if I need to step in and assist, because as a presenter, it's really difficult to always see the chat, see, run your own polls, drop links in and things like that. So it's really helpful to use, even if it's somebody that's not going to be on camera, kind of a host or technical facilitator when you're presenting. Brandy asked if I'm using a ring light, and I'm not, but I've oriented my home office where my stand-up desk is facing a giant window. There was a time when my desk was facing this way, so I was backlit, which is really what you see here in this picture on this slide, is this woman has a window behind her. So I don't have a ring light, but I have natural light right in front of me. And I just adjust my blinds during the day to let in the right amount of light. But lighting is really important. If you were going to spend an hour with the lovely lady on your screen here, you'd probably enjoy her more if she looked like she does on the right, where she's well lit, than she does on the left. So those are things that are also important. Again, keeping your setting your expectations with your speakers, your guests, doing those tech checks, making sure that your equipment is good. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive to be good, but definitely use that.
Hey, Sloan, what about controlling for, background sound, people who were muted and then they unmuted, or they joined, they were, I don't know if you're going to cover this at some point, but I see that's a pretty common interruption everywhere.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So definitely, and this is another reason for using a host or technical facilitator. So in webinar format, we don't experience too many of those interruptions unless you have like a panel and one of the panelists, when they go off screen, forgets to turn their microphone off or something like that. But your host or your technical facilitator can mute all really quickly. They can see the person who's off mute and eating their lunch or something like that and quickly mute them. So that's a really great point, especially in cameras on or meeting format. Then you could go ahead and mute somebody. It's usually one of those things that you do also in your housekeeping at the beginning. If you're in meeting format or cameras on, mics on format, you set the expectations for things like, hey, we really want you to interact today and we want your questions. So when you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask your question. Or you say, we're going to have questions at the end, so please hold them or put your questions in the chat or put them in the Q&A feature or whatever. So great question. Those are things you want to address both in housekeeping as well as another good reason for having a technical facilitator helping you out during the session.
Awesome. We
Michelangelo's asking, do you do a printed version of the script or talking points or rely on the slideshow function? As the facilitator, I do have some notes in front of me that you don't see here because I do, but I do have this content down enough that I don't need it a lot. Like I don't have a ton of notes. This kind of does guide me, but I certainly would never want all of my talking points to be words on a screen in front of my participants. I hope that answers your question there. You're welcome. Okay. And feel free as we're going to drop questions you have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll definitely facilitate those at the end today. Okay, if you are the presenter, these are some basics, and I'm sure most of you know these, but I have to hit them anyway, because to this day, 15 months later, I still see people where like they're using a laptop and it's flipped open and I'm looking up their nose, or they're really too close to the screen, or whatever. So I'm just going to hit these quickly. Camera height and angle are important. I'm in a stand-up workstation. I'm standing up, because I talk here about body stature and posture. If I'm standing as I would in a training classroom, I'm more apt to act like I would in a training classroom. I'm more apt to look at you and use my hands, and you're more apt to engage with me and listen to me. If I'm sitting down and I'm just kind of looking at you like this, and I'm looking at my notes and I'm talking like this, it's going to get boring super fast. It's going to be boring for me. And if it's boring for me, it's going to be boring for you. So your camera height and angle are important. Body stature and position are important. Your eye contact is important. It is difficult. I keep wanting to look here at my slides that you can already see instead of looking here at you. So really train yourself to look at your camera, which means you need to be familiar with your content. So you need to practice and rehearse. Lighting. Again, we talked about lighting, the natural lighting in your environment. If, not everybody has the same setup. So if you're in a really poorly lit room, then go ahead and get yourself a ring light. There's some that clip right on your monitor, super inexpensive. They're not really expensive, and they're plug and play, like they plug into a USB port or to power, and that can help you with lighting. Movement, animation, and pace are just as important virtually as they are in the classroom. If you're connected well with NAA and you've taken advanced facilitator training, or now their virtual facilitator training, Rich George, Sue Weston, and Doug Chasik wrote a really great book that's kind of like our Bible, and that's Outstanding Facilitating Techniques. And you can get this. Jesse, can you drop this link in the chat? It's on that links document. It has a section actually on remote facilitation skills, but really anything in here, what you're doing in the classroom is really going to be very applicable to virtual training as well. So that's a link to the Amazon. It's available in Kindle and in print. I'm not paid to endorse this book. I just think it's a great resource. So I wanted to share that with you guys. But we talk in that program about movement, animation, and pace. And even though I'm standing in front of you in front of a camera, I'm still really focused on my movement, my hands looking at you. Familiarize yourself with the features, rehearse and record. If you are an invited presenter and you're going to be using a platform you're not accustomed to, you really need to make sure you understand all the intricacies of it. And then also, just at the end of the day, give and have a little bit of grace. We've all been doing this for a while now. I still have myself on mute when I start to talk sometimes. Like we still make some of those rookie mistakes. So do the best you can to prepare and invest in a quality presentation. But at the end of the day, something's going to go wrong at some point. A slide's going to get glitchy. A link you share isn't going to work. You're going to share a screen and it's going to pick up the wrong window off of your desktop, or your multiple monitors can sometimes be a little tricky when you're running programs. So give yourself a little bit of grace. Give other presenters a little bit of grace, and just kind of roll with it sometimes. But those to me are some of the high points for when you're the presenter, things to consider and keep in mind. Okay, so to me, we're getting really into the meat of it, and that is keeping participants engaged. We are a wildly distracted species, and I don't know if we are good multitaskers or we are just poorly and inefficiently popcorning our way through the day. But when you look at this setup right here, I'm going to ask us to be super honest in the chat right now. How many of you have more than 2 screens in front of you? Whether it's this, your phone, a tablet, you know, whatever, just drop it in the chat. How many screens do you have in front of you right now? 7, 4, 5, 4. Oh my gosh. So I don't think I've seen anything less than 3 at this point. 5, 3. Okay. I think we're wired, especially in this industry as professionals, to just like, that's a pat on the back. I have 7 things going. I have a million tabs and I am busy, busy, busy. But when it comes time to deliver or receive learning, we owe it to ourselves and the person that put it together to just dial in for that 60 minutes or whatever. So it's your job as a facilitator to do what you can to keep them engaged for that time. And that's even doing funny things like this, like saying, all right, how many screens are you guys looking at right now? Like, how many of you are on the gram looking at so-and-so's story right now? Like, come back, join me here. So that's what we want to talk about a little bit with the rest of our time. So I kind of have two buckets of tools for engagement. Jesse, get off of Facebook. One is internal tools. So tools within the platform that you're using. Again, I'm most familiar with Zoom, so I invite any of you that are familiar with others to drop in other internal tools that your platforms use to help you with engagement. Obviously, chat. We've used chat, I think, for 3 different things so far. Where are you joining us from? With our icebreaker, what other platform are you using? How many screens? So this was just a way, even though we can't see and hear you, for you to engage with us and also with each other, because you're sitting there reading what other people are saying. Breakout rooms. So breakout rooms are great. Those are not available at this time in webinar format with Zoom, but they are a great meeting format. And we use those a lot, especially in our committee work, as well as in some classes. So the thing I would say about breakout rooms, I'm going to share with you at the end of the session a breakout room disaster story. It was not mine, but it does require you to be really familiar with how it works. And to plan ahead on that. But it's an efficient tool and it's really effective. And it's a great way to take a group of 30 or 40 and give them a smaller networking opportunity or idea exchanging opportunity, and then bring them back as a large group. Polls, which we've used here, polls can be used as icebreakers. Polls can be used as quizzes, as check for understanding. Reactions you see here, I saw somebody a second ago did the thumbs up when I said, you know, are you on other screens or whatever. And the cool thing here, we use these, the check, the X, and the back and forth a lot in classes. The check is, I'm good. The X is, I don't get it. The back is, I need you to go back. I didn't catch all that. And the forward is, we're good. Let's move on. So this really helps your learner kind of check in with how they're doing with the content. I think that's really important because you don't want to leave anybody behind. And you also don't want to like keep lagging on something where the whole group's like, yeah, I got it. Let's just keep going. Yeah, Vicky, definitely great for committee meetings, the breakout rooms. So reactions are a nice tool. And also they have the fun ones there. If you're not familiar, those like the clap hand, the party hat, those show up on your video. If you're in a meeting, it shows up on the upper hand of your video for like 30 seconds or something like that. So it's a fun way to say, okay, if you thought that was a great idea, give us the thumbs up. Or if you're ready for a break, you know, put the party hat on or something like that. A whiteboard. Whiteboard is a function in Zoom. I recommend using Whiteboard if you have a touch screen and a stylus. Otherwise, I don't know about you, I cannot draw things with my mouse. I'm terrible at it. So if you have a touch screen, I have one touch screen and a stylus that I use when I'm going to use Whiteboard, but if I'm not on that device, I don't use that. But it's great because all of the learners can participate with that. And then Q&A, and whether you choose to run Q&A through the chat or with the Q&A feature, which is in the webinar format, that's a great way to engage with your audience. And I have some other Q&A tools that I'll share with you here in a few moments. Okay, so some external tools. Again, as I said in the beginning, I'm not an expert. I don't know everything. These are just some things that have worked for me and my team. One of the things that we've used to curate both questions and content ahead of time is something called Slido. Jesse's going to drop the link to Slido here, and in a moment, I'm going to show you an example. But Slido is a tool that you can use to basically, like I said, curate questions from a large group ahead of time. So for example, when we do our big legislative updates or anything legal, I'm sure you guys have done or attended millions of them. In Washington state, as the eviction moratorium nationally rolled out, locally, all kinds of things happen. Same thing for Jesse in Oregon on a week-to-week basis almost. So we knew that our audience was going to have more questions than we could even handle. And we knew most of them were going to have repetitive or duplicate questions. So a way to manage that was to give them an opportunity to ask their questions before the event. So in the registration, we dropped the link to our Slido that we set up for that event. And it said, we invite you to send us your questions now. And they could send in all of their questions. They also in the platform can like upvote questions so that you can see like the questions that are most important to the larger group. So you start your event already having, and also if you have guest presenters, in our case, we often would have some of the local attorneys and things like that, they can prepare to answer the questions. And then you bring up, you share the screen of the dashboard and they will actually see you working through, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. It's also a great way to curate content within a topic. So you can say, hey, we're gonna be talking about off-ramping from the eviction moratorium, what's most important for you to know? And they can put in, topics or content, and then you kind of know how to tailor the conversation when you get started. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Gamification and retention, so important in your educational offerings. So they're fun and meetings and things like that, but education offerings really benefit from gamification. It helps people retain information, and everybody loves a little competition. So one of our favorites is Kahoot. It's something that allows them to use one of their extra devices that they have. It's web-based, so they can play along from their phone, and you can show in real time what's happening on the screen. So you can use Kahoot for polling, you can use it for trivia, you can use it for, again, basically like skill checks, checking for understanding and things like that. Scavify and Trivia are other tools. Scavify is a great like scavenger hunt type program. You can, like, again, we talked earlier about doing pre-work. So you could hide like Easter eggs in your pre-work, kind of. By Easter egg, I mean kind of like certain, like a keyword or a phrase or whatever. And you could set up a Scavify where they have to what do you call it? Like achieve those things or gather those things along the way in some kind of a scavenger hunt. You can also use those for fun virtual events. We've all been trying to do member events and team events and things virtually. So Scavify is fun for that too. And Trivia is just another trivia or information retention tool that you can use. So those are just a couple of our favorites. If you have some that you're using, I'd love for you to drop them in the chat right now. And then the last one for collaboration is Jamboard. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a moment. But Jamboard's a Google product. It's super great. We're going to use the link Jesse dropped in there in just a moment. Don't click on it quite yet. But that Jamboard is basically virtual flip chart. Oh, Kathleen says Mentimeter. I want to look that up. So Jamboard is great for committee work, and we've definitely used it in the classroom in breakout rooms, for it, like in the place of a flip chart. If you would go do a small group activity or a brainstorming session, we've used Jamboard for that. So I want to take a couple of minutes to just demonstrate a couple of these tools for you in case they might be helpful to you in your offerings. So this is a little bit what Slido looks like. So this is actually from our economic forecast a couple of years ago. Courtney, thank you for that. C3 Softworks for gamification, appreciate that. And this is where we curated questions for an economic forecast that we had. We had a local economist, a local developer, and our government affairs person presenting those topics at this event. And so you can see there, people submitted their questions ahead of time. And then the cool thing is you see over on the right on this slide, you see some like a word map. So when you're doing classes and things like that, and people are, either brainstorming or sending questions, you can show them a word map of the words that are most prominent or most relevant or hit, kind of the meat behind their questions. And that's sometimes a cool graphic to throw up in front of them as well. So we love Slido. Again, it helps you manage your questions, especially in things that are legal and maybe controversial. It helps you avoid some mines along the way. It helps you kind of control what you put in front of your panelists. Also, there's nothing like having a live question that really puts somebody on the spot inappropriately. And so using something like this is a way to manage that a little bit. And I should say that most of these tools have free versions. We do subscribe to Slido because we use it a lot. We don't pay it's not a lot, but I just wanted you to know that some of these, Jamboard is totally free. It's a Google product. Slido has a free version. Same thing with Kahoot has a free version, but like how many users and things like that, sometimes you have to pay a little bit. But I want to talk about Jamboard because it's one of my favorites. So we're going to actually, we're going to play with this one a little bit. So, and then Shayna also just shared ideaboards.com is similar to Jamboard and it's free. So Jamboard's free. Like I said, it's great for collaborating and engagement, and it's like a virtual flip chart. So what you see in front of you here is an old Jamboard that our Career Development Committee is using right now to generate content ideas for our virtual education conference. So you see there's some text that's put on there, and then you see a whole bunch of like virtual sticky notes and check marks. So we're going to show you how that works right now. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, Jesse, can you drop that Jamboard link one more time just so it's fresh? We're dropping a link in the chat right now. And this is a link to a Jamboard that I set up for you all for today. And it's going to look like this. I'm going to change my screen here really quick and pull up this is the live Jamboard. So as you guys click on that Jamboard link, you're going to find yourselves, and please open it in a separate tab or even on a different device if you want to, so that you can see it separately from the Zoom session that we're in right now. So I'm just watching for people joining this Jamboard. As you click on it, you should see, don't have the link. It's right in the chat. You guys, I've not seen, oh, you will have to, oh, let me see. Jesse, your messages are going to panelists and not all attendees.
That's a perfect example of what not to do, right?
That's okay. Thanks for letting us know, guys. He's been putting all kinds of cool stuff in the chat. We'll have to go back and put some of those back. But yeah, we're going to put the Jamboard link in there right now for you. Okay, so now you should all have, oh, there we go. We got all kinds of ducks and squirrels and bats joining. That's okay, Shayna, we needed that. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. As you're joining, you'll see a toolbar over on the left, and you'll see there's a pen, there's an eraser, there's a select button, and then the fourth one down is a sticky note. So what I'm gonna have you do is click on the sticky note. You can choose the color that you want, and you just wanna put on here your favorite icebreaker question or activity that you've either heard or that you've done yourself. I'm going to put one on here and then just save it, and then it'll go in there, and we just want to see, see them popping up here. And you'll see you're looking at your Jamboard, but when you look back at the Zoom screen, you'll see that real life in time, you're seeing everyone's contributions pop on there. And I'm just grabbing them and moving them around the screen. So somebody else, Jesse. These are great Disney characters. Oh, we got so many fun ones on here. What are you famous for? That could be a scary one. Great books. I just read Where the Crawdads Sing. It was an amazing book. I know I'm behind the curve on that one, but it was really good. Oh, and Born Illegal. by Trevor Noah. I just finished that one too. That was really good. Born a Crime, not Born Illegal, Born a Crime. Okay, so these are great. So you can see here, this is literally a virtual flip chart. So imagine how you might use this in a team meeting, a committee meeting, in a class. Desi, how could you see yourself using this in your role as a director at Greystar?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. We do a lot of brainstorming, and to be able to use a visual flip chart is something that's important because oftentimes the ideas build upon each other. So if we're talking about, for instance, hey, let's talk about the leasing process. Let's break up the different segments of that, and then zoom in and hone in on each of the specific segments. How do we break those up? But to be able to have these types of contributions where you could restructure and move, thoughts and stuff around, I think would be spectacular.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to share. So Heather just asked a great question. Can you save the chart? This is what's great. It's Google. So it's live. So that link that you clicked on to get here, if you guys save that link, you can come back to this chart. So in my career development committee, they have this link kind of in our Google Doc of resources and tools. And so as long as I have that Google or that Jamboard active, anybody can get to it, modify it, change it. And how you might use this in a class or like in a breakout room is you'll see at the top, it says 1 of 2. There's 2. You can add more slides. So what you might do in a breakout room situation is you give them the Jamboard link. They're obviously all going to access it, on a separate tab. In their breakout rooms, you might say, okay, we have 3 breakout rooms. Breakout room number 1, you're going to go to slide number 1, and you're going to generate a list of closing techniques for closing leases. Breakout room number 2, you're going to create a list of ways to overcome objections. Breakout room number 3, you're going to go to slide number 3, blah, blah, blah. You have them build their board, again, just like a flip chart you would in the classroom. And then when you come back together as a large group, you share them like this. Then what you can do, this is where we build consensus and things like that. You say, okay, go ahead and grab your pen icon and check your 2 favorite, everybody gets 2 check marks, your 2 favorite ideas. And people then just start going in and checking. This is how you saw the board on my slideshow where the career development committee was checking kind of their favorite content ideas for a conference. So again, it's easy, it's fun, it's low tech, like anybody really can do this. It's not difficult. There's a couple security settings when you set up the Jamboard. You have to make sure tripped so that everybody has access and everybody can edit it. But again, it's just a good, fun, dynamic, engaging. It could be used in a manager's meeting, in any kind of meetup, and in a class, obviously, and can be used really well. Okay, this was fun, guys. And if you want this list of icebreaker ideas, just save this link. I'll leave this Jamboard active for a week, and you can come back and check these out and write some of those down.
And Sloan, I just popped up in the chat the Scavify, Kahoot, Slido, and then the book as well too.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. So all those other links that we thought we were saving or sending you along the way, Jesse just put those back in there for you. Okay. So that's kind of it on Jamboard. So I want to share just a couple of pitfalls with you. I'm sharing them because I've done them and I don't want you to do them. But when it comes to using some of these internal and external engagement tools, they're really great, but they do need to be purposeful. So you can't use it for the sake of using it. It really needs to bring something home, right? It needs to drive home a point. It needs to help them, kinesthetically or in some way connect with an idea or something that you've done. And this kind of engagement takes time. That just took us about 6 minutes of our session to do. Now it was worth it to me because I really wanted to share that tool with you and I wanted you to actually do it and not just show it to you on a screen. But it takes time. So, and you won't know how much time it takes if you don't plan, prepare, and rehearse that. So when you're building your virtual presentations, whether it's a meeting or a training, whether it's in camera on or webinar format, plan that in and practice and rehearse it. And if it doesn't work, it's worse than not having it. So I'm going to share with you, I told you earlier that I had a breakout rooms, a horror story. So I sit on a advisory council at a college, and we did this speed networking with the cohort of the students in the program. It's they look forward to it all year. We've done it a couple years in a row, but we had to do it virtually this time. And the school's like, yeah, we're going to use breakout rooms. Well, the people in charge of doing it didn't really understand how to do breakout rooms. And we spent the entire session with them accidentally closing them while we were in the middle of meeting with a student, having to reassign everybody, reopen. Like, it was a total disaster, guys. And this just happened this week. So like I said, if it doesn't work, it's almost worse than not doing it. So just make sure, if you want to test out a new program or a new tool, practice it, be familiar with it. You can open up your own, if you're in Zoom, your own personal meeting space, and practice and rehearse and even record yourself to make sure it all goes well, or have a friend or colleague get on the other end with you and tell you what it looks like from their end and actually work your way through it. So it's worth it. Engagement is important, but it takes time, and it needs to be purposeful. So whatever engagement technique you use, make sure it meets or kind of connects with what you're trying to do. Okay, so we have talked about when to use meeting or cameras on, or webinar, cameras off. And again, it's somewhat personal choice, but I think there really are some best practices around that, typically around size of the group, how relational it is, and things like that. And then also functionality. There are some functions available in these platforms that are available in meeting or cameras on that are not available in the other, and vice versa. How to optimize your presentation for virtual. So again, the content, the flow, the speaker, and the equipment, like those are the big pieces that need to be customized and optimized for virtual learning. And as we go forward, I have one last poll that we're going to leave you with before we get to questions. I don't see virtual going away completely. And I think it's important for us to continue to modify how we use it and reevaluate how we use it as we go forward. The things that, we're doing right now with fully virtual, might not work exactly when you're doing some kind of hybrid or something like that. And then lastly, we talked about keeping participants engaged. I really hope that we were able to keep you guys engaged today. I hope when we get off the call today, you leave feeling like that was a good use of my hour. I'm glad I took that webinar. If not, drop me a line and let me know what we could do better next time. So the last poll I have for you, and this is just kind of for my information, is around how you see the future and your continued use or not use of virtual. So do you see yourself using it very little once you can be in person, because in person is best? Some, like virtual has value, it'll be used when and where it's the best option. Or I intend to use virtual quite often, like maybe most of the time. Okay, we've got 31 of 40. We're just gonna wait a few more seconds here. Okay, I think we have what we're gonna have. So I'm just gonna show you what this looks like. So a couple of us feel like very little in person is best. There's a part of my heart that like agrees with you, because I'm that person. Like, I like to see somebody face to face. But I will tell you that we have been able to grow our reach and the way we've taken care of our members in my role because of this. People that have never come to a class or an event that we've had before because they're out on the peninsula, I live in Washington State, or they're over the Cascade Mountain Range in Eastern Washington, they're here with us now. I feel like they're part of the group. And so that's been great. And that if I only went back to in-person only, then all of a sudden I kind of push them back. Hybrid, I definitely see, for me personally, I think we're going to be hybrid. I think we'll have a time and place for both. I think we're setting up actually a brand new training center right now, and we're setting up to offer hybrid learning where some students will be in person and some will be Zoomed in at the same time. So there'll be some options there for students. That will require some management. There's definitely some pitfalls there, but we're anticipating that. And then finally, I anticipate using virtual a lot, about 36% of you. So I think COVID brought with it a lot of stress and heartache, but it brought some learned efficiencies that we had to finally jump into that were necessary. And so I think that that's good. I'm going to stop sharing that and close that out. And I want to know what questions you have for me or for Jesse. Would just love to know what you think, or if you want to offer up additional things that you have. Do we have anything in the Q&A, Jesse?
No, but I do have a question for you. So what about if I find a really cool virtual background and I want to put it up?
Okay, so this is funny.
Advice on that.
So I forgot to say that. I was telling Jesse, he got on and he had this really cool background. I'm like, well, I'm glad you have that, because I have a note to tell people not to get too cute with their backgrounds. And so that's true, but I want to bring this up. So I'm glad you reminded me of this, Jesse. So as a facilitator, it is important that you still have a professional presentation, that you present professionally. So I don't care what you're wearing on the bottom. I am actually, well, I'm wearing jeans, but from the top up, like you need to be looking like you would in a training room, presenting in front of a group of people. You should be, well groomed and all that good stuff. But your background. So I kind of have two schools of thought. One, we've been virtual for 15 months at this point. People are accustomed to the fact they might see your office. I'm in my home office right now, but I have it blurred because it's not a typical office. Like it's not a study, like it's also a guest room and things like that. So I just kind of have the blur on there. Jesse has I think that's his actual apartment that you see there, his home in the background, but the virtual background he had before was really high quality. And that's because he has a green screen. So if you have a green screen, then using these virtual backgrounds is really wonderful, because when you move, now Jesse's hair short to his head, so it wouldn't really matter. But with some of these virtual backgrounds, even mine with the blurred out background, when I move, sometimes like my hair disappears or my shoulder disappears. It's just kind of wonky looking, and I think distracting. So and there's some of the like video backgrounds, like the swaying palm trees in the beach, like heck yeah, that's great, and I would use that for a meeting or something that's real relational with your team or something like that. But when you're training, you're delivering content, I would keep it simple. Don't go too sassy with it, because okay, Brandy, thanks for joining us. Because that's just distracting, and you want them to focus on, you and the content. So thanks for reminding me of that, Jesse. But yeah, Jesse's got a great background because he has a green screen. Did you show him your green screen?
I did, yeah. So we're running up on the hour. Really quick, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank you, Sloan, for all this awesome information. Sloan and I are going to hang out after. So if you've got a hard stop and you got to pop off, we totally understand that. One thing I do want to just convey that this was brought on and sponsored by the Next Gen, NAA Next Gen. And our goal in Next Gen is to really build tomorrow's leaders in terms of industry leaders. So if you have any questions about Next Gen, please reach out to me, reach out to Stephanie Hurst, Sarah Keene, Sloan Sorbonne. We can help. Or if you have a Next Gen platform in your current association and you want to fine tune and enhance it, we'd be happy to help with that too. So
yeah. I want to thank Jesse and the Next Gen team for having me today. It was really great to hang out with you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will be happy to hang out for a couple more minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, you're free to go. I did want to answer John if he's still on. He said, what's your favorite and most useful if you had to narrow down to just one? That is really hard because they each have kind of a different purpose. I always say Jamboard is my jam. I love Jamboard for committee meetings and group work. Like it's so effective, so easy to use. It stays, right? You can always go back to it, modify it. It's almost better than taking notes, right? But I also really like breakout rooms. In our classes, we ran all of our credential classes except CAMT virtually this year. And so we did utilize putting people in working groups. So they did pre-work ahead of time, work in between classes in their groups, in their small groups. So help them network professionally and build relationships. And it helped us reduce the content. And then we worked in breakout groups in session. So those are some of my favorites. But yeah, I probably love them all just for different purposes.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Tony. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we have to let them go now.
You're free.
You're free. Have a wonderful Thursday. And thank you so much for having me. I hope to see you guys all in Chicago in August.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.